Hello and welcome to the Community Action Project podcast. I'm Matt Ryan, a student with Cape Breton University, currently completing a Bachelor of Arts in Community Studies. I'm also a Frontline RCMP officer working in Toledo, Northwest Territories. Before we begin, I want to acknowledge that this episode is recorded across diverse territories. I speak to you today from traditional lands of the Dene and Métis people, and I encourage all listeners to reflect on Indigenous lands they are situated on. We honor the histories, cultures, and contributions of Indigenous communities past, present, and future. This podcast is part of our COMS 3100 Community Action Project. Our goal is to create space for frontline workers, people on the ground every day supporting individuals facing addiction, trauma, housing instability, systemic challenges. These workers often take on incredible emotional labor with limited resources, recognition, or support. As someone in a frontline role myself, I've witnessed how heavy an emotional load can become, especially in rural and underserved communities. That's why today's conversation matters. It's about listening, learning, and raising the voices of those who do so much, often with so little. Today I'm joined by a nurse who works directly with vulnerable populations. Their identity will remain anonymous, and we thank them deeply for offering their voice and insights to this conversation. This episode will include themes of emotional stress, systemic gaps, and mental health challenges. If you're listening and find any part of this difficult, please feel free to take a break or reach out to support. Let's begin. So I just wanted to thank you for being here today. And to start off, could you introduce yourself a little, maybe not by name, but by the kind of work you do as a frontline nurse?
Sure. I am a nurse. I'm a registered nurse. I've been a registered nurse for 24 years. Previously, I worked in a rural hospital, which was very busy because of the tourist situation that we were working on. And then recently, in the last year, I decided to come up to the Northwest Territories and be a community health nurse, also known as a CHIN.
Cool, thank you for that. What inspired you to pursue this line of work?
My profession in general?
Yeah.
That's a long time ago. What inspired me was, first of all, I was in a business degree at first, and then I decided that I wanted to have the choice in where I wanted to work, and I started to distill about what a small community needs. And we need a teacher, we need a police officer, you need fire people, you need a hospital. And I was drawn to medicine. But I figured I wasn't smart enough to be a doctor, so I took the next best and I became an RN. Very practical reasons. Nothing Florence Nightingale wanting to save humanity or work with people. But at the time it seemed adventurous.
Yeah, no, I hear you. Thank you for that. Before we continue, I just want to remind you that everything you share today is entirely voluntary and anonymous. You're welcome to skip any question or stop at any point. Are you comfortable with continuing?
Oh yeah, 100%.
Thank you. So a little bit about workplace experiences and challenges. So let's start with something positive today. What are some of the most rewarding aspects of your work?
On a personal level, I think it's that you see people at their worst often, and to then have a follow-up to see that the situation has improved. And 90% of that is the patient doing the work themselves, but you had a small portion in that. And I just find it real in the sense that it is humane. It's not an abstract. We're not talking about a financial product. We're talking about people's health. And when that falls apart, you get down to the very basic human needs. And a lot of our differences that we have in our normal daily lives, they kind of disappear when we come back to the essence of what a human needs. And to be part of that and to have that role, and that comes also with a level of appreciation from people. That is important for me, to be appreciated in what I do. That is sort of the reasons, yeah.
Thank you for that. On the flip side, In your day-to-day role, what kinds of challenges do you see most often when working with vulnerable populations?
Well, in case of the vulnerable populations here in the north, it's just pure access to things as simple as a dentist. And the delays that occur from having to travel to find these specialties. I mean, that is just access is not readily available, and that delays and that causes also a higher threshold for people to seek that, and that ultimately leads to poorer health outcomes.
Do you feel that there's adequate mental health or emotional support available to you in your current role? Why or why not?
No, that's the simple short answer to that, because we're on our own. And you have to rely on the people that are around you, but they have their own baggage as well. And it's not like we have availability for a larger group counseling or counselors. They're not available to us. And frankly, I mean, if you would bring a concern up to your manager, they are hundreds of kilometers away. So there's just the distance. For your mental health, you have to take care of yourself. Yeah.
All right. Thank you for sharing that. And how do those challenges affect your own mental health, workload, and sense of being supported as a whole?
Well, like I said, I try to take care of that myself with online counseling, but also just making sure that I take good care of myself. I find it important to go out and meet other people. I find it important to go out and get physical exercise. Doesn't have to be strenuous. Preferably not in a gym. I like to be moving and seeing new things. And I can always go back mentally to saying to myself that this is, I'm in a lot more fortunate position than the people that I'm working for. And also, I have the added benefit of having a short period of time and then I go home where I can recharge. And I can go back to the thoughts of when I was working in a busy hospital, working shift work. And that was much harder, I found, than this at this moment.
Sure. Okay. So I'll touch a little bit on organizational culture and support. And at any time, of course, stop me if you'd like to skip to the next question. Right?
Sure.
How supported do you feel by your organization or employer, especially during times of high stress or emotional fatigue?
Well, I'm going to say that they do their best, but there's only so much they can do. At the end of the day, it's just you and your coworker in the community, and you got to make it happen, and you have to get through to it. Now, I haven't been in a situation where I found that I needed their assistance, so I can't really comment to what is available and what would be done. But like I said, at the end of the day, I'm sure that if I needed a break and I needed to get out of here, they would get me out of here.
For sure.
But you got to make it happen by yourself.
So to touch on top of that, are there any formal supports available to you? Like for our CMP example, we have employee assistance program or peer support, mental health training, or even paid time off. If so, are they accessible or helpful?
I haven't, like I said, I don't know exactly the full scope of the resources, but I do know that first of all, there is, if you need time off, that will be available.
Yeah.
And our health plan does provide for mental health counseling. I'm not quite sure what the budget for that is and how that would work out. So those things are available to us, but as on the ground in the field, we're just very limited in that aspect.
For sure. I feel your pain there. So I'll touch a little bit on community context and rural considerations at this point. If applicable to you, how does working in a rural or under-resourced area impact your ability to access professional support or workplace resources?
Well, it's just simply the distance and the time. And also the distance makes that it is more impersonal. But I haven't yet had to experience that, so I can't really comment in full detail on that.
Okay, no worries. In smaller or close-knit communities, such as Toledo, for example, privacy and stigma can sometimes make things harder. Have you experienced that? And does it affect your work?
No, I can't say that I've really experienced that. One thing that you have to be very careful about, especially because you're a nurse and you're working in a small clinic where everybody else that works there is attached to the community, that you have to be very, very conscious of patient confidentiality.
Absolutely.
And whereas in a hospital, you can be amongst your coworkers and you can kind of let that guard down a little bit, while still maintaining a level of professionality. Here you have to be more reserved on that. And that doesn't really affect me. I just really need to be aware of what I say and who I say it to.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So I'll touch on identifying gaps and potential improvements. So looking at your role more broadly as a nurse, what kind of supports or resources do you wish were available but currently aren't?
I think again, just tough question, but one of the things that I miss, and I don't necessarily know if that is easily overcome, but it would be nice if you could reach out to more of your peers. It would be nice if I could just talk to the nurses in Delaney once a week or whatever. Ask them how their week was, how they deal with something. Just also as another resource to see how people are doing the business of running a clinic, because I understand that it differs from community to community. And me being new here, I'm open to suggestions on how to do things better. But just on a side note, I remember we heard about another community where there was a murder, a stabbing of two 14-year-old girls, and one of them came into the clinic and ended up passing away there. And I really wonder what was available to them and what would have been done, because we obviously the region is so small, you hear about it, but you're not going to pick up the phone and ask them if they're okay.
All right, thank you for that. That insight is very important. If you could recommend one change at a policy level in the workplace or even within the community, what would be to better support frontline workers like yourself? What would it be to better support us?
I honestly don't know. I would recommend everybody to at least have some form of, even if it's online, whether it's coaching or counseling, where you can just talk things a little through if that's needed, and even just have a chat with somebody outside of your own sphere, because the isolation does mean that you keep your guard up to other people as well. Even if you're friends, you don't want to kind of let up the idea that you're not having a very good time. So that's just one thing that I would recommend. And the other thing that has to be available to you is a way to get some sort of physical exercise. Now, we have a wonderful rec center here, so I think that's important.
Yeah. Okay. Do you use that frequently? Yeah.
I do mostly in winter. I'm not a gym guy, but in winter I'll go and use the rowing machine.
Perfect. Are there any programs, practices, or organizations, locally or nationally, that you think are doing a great job supporting workers in your position?
If there are, I haven't come across them. I know that I know this from during COVID, and I'm talking about Alberta Health Services. There is a sort of a helpline that frontline workers can call, but basically what they do is they coordinate that you can go get seen by a local counselor in your community. And again, that's not something that I've made use of, but I know that there were other coworkers that were. And I mean, this was also during COVID, so there was big delays, and it was all online, and
sure,
that wasn't ideal. But I can't really pick out one particular organization and I say you're doing a good job. I mean, myself, I go through BetterHelp, an online counseling that is available. I understand that there's a lot more organizations like that, and the threshold for that is low. And the other thing is the price is low, because if you look at we've talked about that, if you look at any sort of counseling and you want to go an in-person session and you don't have coverage,
Yeah.
This is the unfortunate thing, just in general, just as a tangent. I find it a bit discriminatory based on salary. Like, if you have a job that is well supported, what I mean unionized, then all of a sudden everything is available to you: dental, mental health, whatnot. But if you are any other profession that it doesn't have those, even if you're making a half decent salary, you're on your own, and even your kids are on your own. And I believe that, at least dental health should be provided for children up to the age of 18. Maybe not all braces and teeth whitening, but at least a very basic.
Sure. Yeah. No, I completely agree with you on that. So you already touched on what I was going to speak about next, which is stigma, self-care, and voice. You touched on what you do for your own mental health, and honestly, it's great aspects because I do the same. Everything from going to the gym, going for a walk, reaching out to peers, your friends, people outside the community, especially when the community is so small. One point I'd like to touch on is...
Phone call.
Get a phone call. I'll just...
Yeah.
Sorry for that brief pause there. So back where we were, stigma, self-care, and voice. I know you answered some of that, how to cope with it in your own mental health. The question I had was, do you feel comfortable talking openly about mental health or work-related stress with your coworkers or supervisors?
Yes, I do. And I think that threshold has come down a lot over since COVID, where people are much more focused on mental health. Now, as a little side note, I think also for the next generation, this might not be a popular opinion, but there can be an overemphasis. And I think if we start instructing young people to constantly focus on their mental health, you can also spiral down in thinking that, every time that you are not happy or you are depressed or sad, that is a problem. No, that's also life. Like, life goes up and down and we're not always happy. I actually just finished reading a book. It's called Crazy Like Us, and it's about the basically exporting of PTSD to other cultures that don't recognize. I myself have gone to Africa a few times, and it's interesting when you talk to the population there that they absolutely do not recognize things like depression. Life is so hard that those are some of the things. So, I mean, mental health, really important. Don't dwell on it, is I think the shortest that I would say to that. But there has been in the past so much stigma, and I guess that's what I'm leading to. There's been so much stigma. It's great that we've opened up to it, but we're not always going to be happy. So there has to be a balance between how much you focus on yourself and how you are, and have a relation to. And that's where other people are important, and not just counselors, but just like friends and peers. They are your mirror, and if you are not in a good spot and you talk to somebody, you can relate, or you can, but just by voicing the words, you can put things more into context. You don't necessarily need a counselor the whole time.
Absolutely. That was well said. Thank you for that. So the last thing I'll go over now is closing reflections.